KZUFM, that song Memories ran over a little bit. I'm sorry, a few minutes. That gives you time to get to your telephone, and we'll take calls for the remaining 26 minutes here on KAZU. The telephone number, do you have it handy? If not, I'll give it to you. 375-3082. If you have any questions about the information I put on the radio in the past few weeks, if you want to share things you've read, books, movies, anything that you want to talk about and share on the air, you can call here at 375-3082 for the next 25 minutes before World Watchers officially begins. Did any of you watch the Tony Awards last night? Is this listening audience interested in plays? I happen to like plays very much. I talk about them all the time, and particularly the musical comedies. Our local theater here has some very good productions. Did any of you see Pippin? Did you like it? What do you think about that's a very sophisticated play, an excellent play about the son of Charlemagne searching for the answer to life. What is the meaning of life? It was a good show. In fact, MPC is putting on 7 productions for $15. Marvelous plays. I just sent in a check there. Support your local theater, your live theater. It's really great. That song I put on, I've had it on before, but it was Betty Buckley singing from the play Cats that won so many awards. I can't figure out why I like that play so much. It really stayed with me, and every time I hear any of the songs, I get very moved about it. And last night, Mrs. T.S. Eliot, the widow of T.S. Eliot, was on the stage to receive the Tony Award for her husband, who wrote those poems a long time ago, and the poems were set to music very brilliantly by Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's a very moving play. As I say, it's a story about cats, their idiosyncrasies, their habits, and so forth. But there's something magical about the play. They compared it to the play Chorus Line. There's a cohesiveness of the people running through it. There's nothing political about cats, but it's something that energizes. You don't have to think about politics or political assassinations or history all of the time. And certainly the light opera is one of the ways that I relax and enjoy it tremendously. We'll take our first call now, and for those of you who want to call after that, it's 375-3082. Hello?
Hi, Mae.
Yes.
Listen, I was wondering if you saw the Sun Weekly newspaper this week.
The Sun Weekly, where's that come up from, up near San Francisco?
I don't know.
The Sun Weekly?
It's kind of like that National Examiner.
Oh, did you...
Headline, Hitler's secret UFO conspiracy.
Oh, do you have the article there?
Mm-hmm.
What is new in it that isn't from that book, the UFOs and...
Well, it's pretty similar, but...
is it taken from that...
It's getting out more and more now.
Was it taken from that original, the large book on Hitler in the Antarctic? Does it seem to be similar?
Yeah. Have you seen this article?
No, but I just wondered if there was any new material.
It's pretty similar, but the thing I thought was interesting, they had one other article in here. It sounded a lot like the stuff that's on your show. They had a thing, Jim Jones is still alive.
No, that's Peter Beater's thing.
No, this is Joseph Holsinger.
Joe Holsinger believes he's alive?
That's what it says here.
Well, for listeners who don't know, Joe Holsinger was the aide to Leo Ryan, who was killed down in Jonestown. Well, I'll call him in the morning and see if he really believes that. I don't know. Incidentally, regarding those Hitler articles, if you mentioned the possibility that Adolf could possibly be alive, the first sentence is, oh, he's too old, he couldn't do anything. Last night at the Tony Awards, Mr. George Abbott, the director, got up. He had directed the play On Your Toes, and he couldn't win an award because he won it 35 years ago. He's 96 years old. And he got up on the stage and spoke and made presentations. And Mr. Averell Harriman was over in Moscow with Drop-Off this week. He's 92 and gave press conferences and held conferences on peace and war and et cetera over in the Soviet Union. So the age is people take that as an absolute factor, not examining the evidence, but the age alone proves that he couldn't be doing anything if he were alive, and he could direct the world like Abbott directed On Your Toes.
That's right.
At 96, he's still going. Well, no, I didn't see it. Is it on the stands now, or does it leave tomorrow?
Maybe going. I got an extra copy.
Okay, and then if any listeners want it, send self-addressed stamped envelope. Okay, thanks for sharing that.
There was something else I was wondering.
Mm-hmm.
You said this week that Seymour Hersh, I think his book had come out talking about Kissinger.
Yeah, have you read any reviews in the paper?
No, I was wondering what you thought.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a dynamite story. I'll be doing more on World Watchers, just mentioning it tonight, but there were other stories I wanted to lead into it because next week is that anniversary of the Watergate break-in. And in Seymour Hersh's book, he tells how Kissinger was arranging the removal of Richard Nixon, and that's what my motive was for the Watergate exactly, what was it, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And his backup of the power of Kissinger and giving top secret information to Hugo Humphrey to try and it's not Hugo Humphrey, Hubert Humphrey, to give him information from Nelson Rockefeller's secret files to run against Nixon. Then he would give Nixon secret papers to butter him up to make sure that he would be the security advisor to either president. But that goes along with my thesis that he was selected no matter who would win. He would be the man who'd run the National Security Council of the State Department. So that he had he also had Agnew in case he won the nomination. He was close to Agnew and close to Nelson Rockefeller, and he was given by the Pentagon top secret papers to endear himself to all of them, so that no matter who wins, he's in. Mr. Fritz Kramer and Henry Kissinger and Alexander Haig just do a ballet with everybody who's in office. So we'll do more next week. I'll just mention it briefly this week, and then I'm really, because there's so many other things I thought were more important, and that'll be around for a long time.
Did Seymour Hersh get any of this information from you?
Well, Seymour Hersh had my realist article in 1982, in the summer of 82. And I think Paul Krasner quoted him in the realist in 1983 saying, he was asked, what do you think of Mae Brussell and her mentioning Tom Pappas and the military junta of Greece that were funding Richard Nixon. That was all in my realist article in 1982. And this is in his new book.
72.
In 1972, rather. And in 1983, he has in his book, and his comment in 1972 was, well, Mae Brussell's crazy, but she's right. Well, he didn't know me, and I don't know why he says, maybe I was crazy to come out and just say it at the time. It sounded so outrageous. But he said I was right, just like he told me I'm right on going after Henry Kissinger as possibly a high-level Nazi plant in this country. So he has in this book things about Tom Pappas and the military junta, and he is shifting, what would be, he doesn't come outright and say the motive for Watergate of Alex Butterfield and Haig bugging Nixon and getting him out, but by getting Nixon out, in comes Ford. Gerald Ford, who was on the Warren Commission, and Henry Kissinger are the traveling corporate bigwigs now who go all over the world and have tremendous influence, more than they'd have even in office in some ways. And they're buddies, and they were then, and then Ford pardons Nixon for all future crimes, which could even involve murder, if anyone want to get specific. And it's the anniversary of Robert Kennedy's death tonight. But Gerald Ford clears him. He's appointed by, Nixon appoints Gerald Ford to become his president. Ford clears Nixon of all crimes. Haig takes over the White House while this is going on, and Kissinger, according to Seymour Hersh, is sliding in and out of the offices like playing a violin on everybody's heart, Mr. Kling. Well, he bugged everybody. So it's just a mess of tanglement. But everything that I've read, that I haven't read the book, but the articles, the summaries of them, and the interviews, and he was on Nightline, support what I said was the motive for Watergate and the basic character of these slimy people.
Seymour Hersh was on Nightline?
Yeah, he was on Nightline this last week.
Oh, I saw when Kissinger was on there.
Well, the next night he was on. Yeah, it was pretty good. I'm sending for a transcript, so we can get those copies if you want them. Okay, thanks for calling. Okay, bye-bye. Now, if you have any questions or want to talk about the Seymour Hersh article, okay, here's another phone. And we'll write this down in case you have a call after this one, 375-3082, and it's Mae Brussell. Hello?
Hello, Mae, calling from
Santa Cruz.
Yes, speaking of Avril Harriman,
Yes.
in case some people have forgotten, I think it's necessary to point out that aggressive foreign policy and nuclear arms race started with the Truman administration.
Oh, yeah, we didn't get, I just mentioned Harriman's age. I didn't mention when he was ambassador to Moscow or his beginning of the original genocide programs before Hitler did them.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to ask about, and I wanted to go over some of the salient features of that administration.
Yeah.
Truman, you know, he celebrated the dropping of the atomic bomb.
Uh-huh.
People were being burned. He thought that was the greatest thing in history.
Yeah, well, I could see them all dancing around, just clapping their hands. Oh, wow.
A battleship there. He thought that was great.
Uh-huh.
He was warned by not only by people outside of his party, scientists and intellectuals, but also people within his own party that leaving Russia out was going to lead to an arms race.
Well, that's what he wanted.
Yeah. And he was one of the first to capitalize on the idea that there was this great enemy.
Oh, yeah.
And that peace had to be gotten through power. He wanted an atomic monopoly.
He and Edward Stimson, very
Right.
evil, and the Dulles brothers. I mean, it's a toss-up.
Right.
Harriman is very, very important. I could do one evening on just Avril. Harriman, and can you imagine John McCloy is 82 and Harriman's 92, and he's over there in the Soviet Union and talking, in quotes, peace, because he wants in his old age to be remembered not as the warmonger he is. I think he just left some huge amount, like $30 million to Columbia University for Russian studies, which would bring in people like Brzezinski from Poland and from the Galen operation. And so to match that, John McCloy says, well, I have to have a German study at Harvard. I'll bring in 10 Germans every year because Columbia has the Russians.
Yeah. And, of course, he resisted the denazification of Germany and wanted to rebuild it.
Oh, yes.
Russia was having paranoid fits
Uh-huh.
over that because they wanted to secure their capitalistic market
Uh-huh.
in Europe, because if Europe fell, that was it.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that most people in our colleges and in our high schools don't learn history, because these people like Herbert Hoover and Harriman and Dulles
Yeah, well, they're told that the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, the two
saved the world.
that consolidated all this.
I know.
Were wonderful.
I know.
And, well, another thing that he did was he was one of the first presidents to load the policy-making agencies with military men as financiers,
Truman.
and to advocate America as the policeman of the Western Hemisphere in relation to Latin America.
Yeah, well, they had that planned a long time. Yeah.
Even and Greece was the they're bringing in that fascist regime after 2 years of fighting from 1947 to 1949,
Mm-hmm.
led the way to all later coups, all the way
Yeah.
to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
He also, people should remember that he also established the Federal Employee Loyalty Program.
Yeah, I wonder what Harriman was doing over in Moscow this week.
I don't know. I wish I could.
Too bad we don't get some younger people with vision who no one in the National Security Council from the Russian Department or the Polish has ever been to the Soviet Union. Can you imagine dictating how people are going to burn and, never, I guess they don't want to know them because they want to kill them. Well, listen, I'll take some more calls, but I appreciate your calling. We can do more. I have a whole section some night to do on Harriman and the genocide.
Okay, what I'd like to know specifically, if you could just briefly talk about what was happening with the Nazi connections when all this was going on, say between 1945 to 47, 48.
1945 to 48.
Uh-huh.
Well, the most gross connection was that by the end of the war that took place May the 8th, 1945 officially, and by the end of the war, by July, Hitler's chief of intelligence, Reinhard Gehlen, had been put in American uniform. Oh, first he was knighted by the Vatican to be made the Sovereign Military Order of Malta to defend militarily the Vatican and the Roman Church first. Then he flies to the Pentagon and comes here and stays and structures what we never had before, which threw our Constitution out of kilter. He formed every loophole for the president and the advisors later. He formed the National Security Council and the CIA from the OSS, so that from then on...
The Security Act established that.
That's right, but that was in this time period in 1947, you see. So and Herbert Hoover was on that, and Joe Kennedy, and once that was made, then the constituents from the 48 states at that time, or 50 states now, would say, if we say to Congressman Panetta, we don't want to send $50 million to El Salvador today, then they say, well, your people at home don't know how grave the situation is. We'll advise you because they're ignorant, and it'll all fall. So therefore, you have to vote with us because they don't know. So the National Security Advisor calls in the individual congressman and twists their arms and wrists, and they think that they are doing something on the basis of securing the country, whereas it's falling deeper into a hole, of debt and near revolution and chaos, just like during the Vietnam War. So that no longer could men go to Congress and represent the people at home. They are in the role now of telling the people at home what we have to sacrifice and do. So the National Security Advisor is with the president every day, and they say, well, this is the report on El Salvador, this is the one on Nicaragua, this is how many troops there are. And they decided a long time ago we were training the Somoza people to go back into Nicaragua for the last 3 years in Florida. And I didn't bring it in today. I have a map from the Washington Post on American advisors trained in Panama. We have 42,000 trained soldiers in South America and Central America, just trained at one school in Panama. So that we say the Russians are over there. We have 42,000 armed soldiers trained in sabotage and blowing up bridges and with all kinds of Russian weapons they can throw on the ground and say the Ruskies are here. And so it's broken down by each country how many advisors. We literally run every country.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned this order of Malta. I remember there was a speech made by the under the secretary to the Russian embassy, Keenan, and he talked about there was a special providence that made America the moral and
Keenan's another one, that ambassador to Russia.
And the more I think about it, it seems like this crusade was a religious crusade.
It is a holy war, absolutely.
A holy war,
yeah. In fact, I got a thread. I was going to read on the air later on World Watchers. I got a letter from a woman in Alaska telling me that if I didn't talk about Mr. Reverend Swaggart, who was in Oakland last week, that people in my profession would get cancer. If I didn't promote on the radio program the Christian Assembly up in Oakland last week. It's getting to that, okay? I mean, and then it's the same week that the man who isolated the cancer virus died, and he did that in 1933. Got the Nobel Prize. So I got a letter this week, if you don't, or last week, if you don't. It depends which one. Well, listen, thanks for calling in. Sometime I'll do something just on Harriman and Keenan. They were.
I'd also like to hear you do something on the religious crusade, because it seems like our Judeo-Christian tradition is really behind our ideas about one country, one people to lead the whole world.
Yeah. Well, do you listen every week to World Watchers?
Yes.
Okay, because I've been talking about the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and if somebody is a member, that I identify them all the time, like William Clark and William Clacy and the Buckley brothers and Mr. Volpe. I mean, there's a whole J. Peter Grace and everyone on his board practically, and it's a tremendous group. Cardinal Spellman, and they ran the war in Vietnam. I mean, this was a Christian war. This was for the Vatican.
It's still onward Christian soldiers.
Yeah, people are not aware of that, but it really is a holy war, and the guy who's the supreme commander is Ronald Reagan with his Eureka College, which is early Christian training, and so that he can send any amount, 50 million, and ask 20 million more to kill. We could have a house for everyone in El Salvador for that. Instead of killing them, just build some homes, and leave something. And the employment, equipment sold and everything this way, just leave bodies like Vietnam, just defoliate it and kill people, and then what do you have left?
Well, more souls for Jesus.
Listen, somebody's not going to like that. There are some good people who are truly religious, but they don't understand that religion is being used by the Defense Department and the CIA for justification of policies that they wouldn't approve of if they were really religious.
Well, it seems to me that it has been used for the last 1,000 years.
Well, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta is 1,000 years old. It started 1,000 years ago.
In fact, it seems to me that Christianity is not only responsible for our foreign policy, but our environmental collapse collapse.
Yeah.
The raping of the environment.
Well, Mr. Watts speaks in tongues. He's a devout person who, swears by his religious background and then just wants to decimate, the natural life around here.
Yeah, well, it seems like the mess we're in all the way around has a lot to do with Christianity.
Well, I think there's a lot of non-Christians that have their part, too. I don't think we'll blame it all on them. I could name a few Jews and Mormons if you want.
Well, I'm talking about a worldview.
Yeah. But there's no monopoly on corruption, and what they do is divide it evenly. Like if Michael Sindona of the Vatican is involved with organized crime and even charged with killing a judge in Italy, his co-partner in the crime who's been charged is David Kennedy, who's a high officer in the Mormon Church. So that the Mormons work with the Vatican if it has to do with mafia or narcotics, or Pat Boone, who I don't believe is a Catholic, has a runway with Daniel Ludwig down in Australia for narcotics and heroin coming into the United States. That's right from Wall Street Journal, front page Wall Street Journal. So there's no monopoly on the connections here. It just has to do more with greed than country or religion. But I think making the decisions for war has to do with God, because without that justification, it would be hard to do it. Okay, thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, that was a long discussion. We're not taking a lot of calls, but they're interesting discussions. I hope you like them. And we'll take quick calls. Some are quick answers, yes, no, or maybe, and some are a little longer. And then we bring up more questions than we solve, like Mr. Harriman and Mr. Keenan in the foreign policy, our ambassadors to the Soviet Union. Walter Stessel was ambassador at the Soviet Union at the time that Marina Oswald came to this country by way of the Galen operation, and Lee Oswald worked for Navy intelligence. He was also ambassador to Poland and Germany, then came on to become assistant of the Secretary of State under Haig. And when Haig was abruptly fired just a year ago after the Beirut invasion, which I'm going into in about 5 minutes or shortly, and discuss the anniversary of that and the implications of it, Haig left and Walter Stessel left with him and quietly retired. Walter is the fellow I used to live next door to. I've told you that story. When he came home, I used to play Love in Bloom as he came up the alley. He was about 3 years ahead of me at Beverly High, graduated just after the year I was a freshman, then went on to Stanford. And so I just saw him as a neighbor, and he went on to the State Department, had all these interesting positions. The telephone number here is 375-3082. We have about 4 minutes to take another call if you want. Interesting article I thought was interesting, The Empire of George Lucas. I don't get excited about science fiction. I can't understand how many millions or billions go into it, or how desperate people are for any sign of entertainment to get away from the reality of the world, the escapism of the world. And I guess the ultimate is spending $6 or $8 million a week on these Star Wars and these new movies. And there's a story in the San Francisco Examiner yesterday about the secret empire of George Lucas, building a home up in Marin County, $50 million complex on 3,000 acres, Lucas Land they call it. The fellow that designed Epcot for Disney is designing this 45,000 square feet in one home, just a home. One more call, and then we begin World Watchers. Hello?
Hello, this is Al in Ben Lomond.
Okay. How are you?
There's just one little item here in the obits
Uh-huh.
that I was wondering if it had any relation to anything. Kathy Petrash, Greenspan, an Emmy Award-winning producer whose firm was chosen to produce the official film of the 1984 Olympics, died yesterday after a brief illness. She was 51.
Uh-huh.
And goes on to tell about what a great job she's done.
She was hired to do the next Olympics, and I also understand the 20th Century Fox was to film it, so evidently they were together. I saw the obituary. I think it's interesting because I am wanting, like 2 or 3 evenings in August, I'm just getting a month, on the comparison of the plans for the Reichstag, the excuse for Hitler to take over the complete control, and the buildup in Los Angeles with the LAPD and the secret files and the armies moving in. I just got an article from the magazine Eagle, August 83, new one, on suggesting this kind of takeover Reichstag by the Green Berets, the Special Forces, the terrorism. I forget the title. I just got it today. And it suggests what's going to happen. It's from the magazine Los Angeles, and it's a reprint from Eagle. And it's, the government's putting $50 million into security, and everybody involved in the Olympic security has a very interesting background, and the personalities, and they've been so quiet and secret. And a little while later, on the program tonight, later, I'll talk a little bit about that. When the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigated for the second time John Kennedy's murder and Martin Luther King's.
Well, she's from NBC.
What?
She's from NBC.
From NBC, that's Marvin Kalb.
Greenspan wrote and produced for such well-known personalities as Barbara Walters,
Ed McMahon, Sovereign Military Order of Malta. He was just knighted along with Haig. Yeah.
Joe Garagiola. Frank McGee.
You know what's interesting? Go to Who's Who and look up the names. That's what I do when I read a certain story, and it's really interesting. We know Barbara Walters. We know NBC with Marvin Kalb and that propaganda.
Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe somebody wanted her out of the way because of what she might film.
Yeah, maybe they want the new team in, right? I thought the same thing when I saw the obituary, that you shift position and get the people in behind the cameras that you want, that are being trained, like the Special Forces, or the Marvin Davis and the 20th Century Gang, which is Henry Kissinger and Gerald Ford and William Rogers and Anna Chenault. You know, and that's such a packed board. I laugh every time I repeat it. Well, listen, thanks for calling. We're about 1 minute on top here, and I've got a lot of other good obits to share with you. We'll get to them. Bye-bye. Okay, that 25 minutes went fast. As I said, I had the music. I didn't realize it would run that long, but we'll start with World Watchers and then go into the regular format where I do not take calls, but you can call me next week if you have any questions of what you hear on the air.